Good evening, good people. We are so glad that you're here with us tonight. We're going to get started in just a minute, but as you all are getting in here, let's take a moment to give some love to the team that makes these calls happen. This is more than just checking a demographic box for us. This is about making sure that all of us have access to learn from and with one another and build the power of our people. Thank you for making this more possible, interpretation team. Can we show some love for the interpreters in the chat, y'all? We love you. Thanks for being here. I want to shout out On Point, all the tech and comms and design crew, every single one of the partner organizations that make this call possible, and every single one of you for getting folks on the call this evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this mass call to process the ongoing fallout of the elections and our feelings, to be reminded of our work in this time, and to learn together. As we've been doing for many months now, this mass call is our chance to step back as a movement and examine where we are. We want to look at the current events, but we also want to look past the punditry and put this moment in a bigger context. So thank you for prioritizing this call this evening and not regarding it robbery, to come build community together. I want you to take one moment to holler at your folks real quick. Are your friends here? Are your co-organizers here? Are your fellow travelers? Are your cousins and them on this call? If not, I want you to take a second and tell them to come on and join us. I've also, over the last few calls, seen you all posting. Several of you have tagged the Working Families Party and myself on Instagram. I want y'all to keep that up. Be sure to follow Working Families Party. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel by searching Working Families Party. Some of you are watching this there, and others of you on Instagram that aren't following the page yet can just go to @workingfamilies or @_Ash-Dashley, all spelled out, _ on IG. I want you to tell your folks that you're on tonight. I want you to ask them to come on in the room. If you hear something that you think is worth sharing, put it out there in the world. It's our job in this season to educate, agitate, motivate, and organize our folks. So let's not miss the opportunity to do that starting right here, right now, this evening. We're going to drop those Instagram links in the chat. Today, we're going to be hearing from people on the front lines of our movement about what they're doing and what you can do to do your part. I'm Ashley Woodard Henderson, your host for this evening. Welcome to folks who haven't missed a call. We see you, we love you. And to our new folks too, we see you and we're glad that you've joined us. If you're watching on Zoom, I want you to take a second, as folks are already doing. I want you to use the chat to say hello. Tell us where you're calling in from. If you want to rep your organization or your crew, feel free to do that as well. I also, again, want to shout out our folks that are watching on Instagram and YouTube. Y'all feel free to do the same in the comments. And I'm sending some special love to folks who are going to watch this recording after tonight. We see you. We love you. We appreciate you. One thing before we get into it, I just want to be clear, as we do every call, that when you fight for justice and liberation, there's always going to be some haters. The more visible that our work is, the more they're going to come after us. It is certainly upsetting, but we will not be surprised if there are trolls on with us tonight. So if you see any hateful messages in the chat, in the comments, wherever you're watching, I just want you to flood the chat with solidarity and other positive messages of love and affirmation of the work that we're doing together and of each other. We remember on these calls that we can disagree without disrespecting each other, and we behave accordingly. Friends, we are coming together to grow our movement. That's our goal. And we're also going to be doing that by learning about and exercising our power. If you've tuned into any of these calls over the 9 some odd months that we've been doing them, you know full well that we are not shy about talking about power. Tonight, we're going to ground ourselves in the process of measuring and counting our power. There is still a lot of data that's being gathered, and we just don't know exactly what happened in this election. And we won't know final counts for quite some time. But as we get that data, we're going to get a clearer and more precise picture of which ways power is moving on our political map. But even still, some things are already clear. Our quest to build power for our communities did not start with this election cycle, and it certainly will not end with this election cycle. Our journey on this road has been long, and we still have miles to go. There's a danger in moments like this that we'll turn away from power. The pain that we are feeling will be so much that we turn away from our responsibility to build power and to wield power in ways that we are aligned, in ways that are aligned with our values. We'll see so many abuses of power and arrogance of power, and it'll leave some of us feeling powerless. Friends, none of us are superhuman, right? We are divine and innately human. And it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to not feel like a superhero every day. And as I've said before, we have to feel all of our feelings because it's only when they make us numb to our feelings that their power over us will be complete. It's in this moment when so many people are feeling powerlessness that our first responsibility is to do whatever it takes to find that sense of power in ourselves and in each other. If we're unable to find that light, we will be unable to share it with others. If the sound of hope has gone mute in our own hearts, we will not be able to lift our voices in song to pass that spirit on to others. Have you found yours yet? Let's take a breath and breathe it in. Let's look for it. Let's look through the shadows of night and see the light of that star, that North Star that our ancestors told us to follow. Let's breathe in the light of that star, the direction and the faith that it brings in our people. And let's breathe out the doubt and anything the opposition or our own imperfections have seeded in us to believe that we can't win, because I believe that we can win, y'all. Here's what we cannot do in this moment. We can not only turn inwards, we can't just be introspective, we can't just navel gaze. We also have to keep our heads up and our feet moving. The temptation will be here to unplug, to sleep. And I don't mean rest our bodies or rest our minds, but I mean to deaden our souls. And when the moment calls for us to think big and aspirationally, I believe that we will step up. We will not turn down our ambitions, and we will seek to take care of all of us, not just our own. We define this beloved community differently than that individualism. It's not just me. It's not just me taking care of my family. It's not just about my friends, the people that I agree with. The wisdom of our labor brothers and sisters speaks to the moment that we're in with crystal clarity. An injury to one is an injury to all. We in this community will not engage in small thinking. Sure, we're going to take care of ourselves and each other and assess the last season of our work and its effectiveness, but we'll also think and play big. We will defend our people, and we will also be looking for ways to go on the offense. Because one thing's for certain and two things for sure, Trump and his loyalists will overplay their hands, y'all. They will break their promises. And the cracks in the facade of what they're trying to build can and will break. Our job is to help make it so and ensure our people understand and utilize our collective power. As our beloved Nika Giovanni, who has been welcomed into the great cloud of witnesses, said, let's build what we become when we dream, good people. So if you're with me in this struggle, I ask you to say it out loud and proud in the chat. Tell me that you are ready to become who we could be when we dream it so. Let me know that you're one in the number of the folks that is going to build the power of working families in this season. I know you're down because you didn't regard it robbery to be with us tonight. So if you are about it, I want you to say I'm down in the chat. There are many, many things that you can do to plug into this collective work to ensure that we control the terrain in which we continue to build our power. If you haven't already, I want you to text mass call to 30403 for a list of the ways that you can take action. There's a plethora of ways that you can get down with the Working Families Party and our sister organizations. And the easiest way for us to get that information to you is for you to text mass call to 30403 so we can keep you in the loop. We're also going to drop some ways that you can be down in the chat, other than just texting mass call to 30403. One way is that you can join the Working Families Party. You can join as a member, as a dues paying member. You can come to a WFP welcome gathering, and we're going to drop that link in the chat for you to sign up. You can gear up with Surge, showing up for racial justice, and be a part of their 10-week training series. You can become a wolf pack leader or join a wolf pack near you and help build the party of our dreams that we've always deserved. You can join us for orientation on the 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to drop that in the chat as well. And then, of course, you can access all of the recordings and materials from past mass calls at workingfamilies.org/mass calls. Again, workingfamilies.org/mass calls. And last but certainly not least, you can evangelize the good news, the gospel of the Working Families Party by asking them to text mass call to 30403. So I want you to do the legwork of making sure that other folks have access to this gift that the party has developed. Well, some of you might be wondering, especially if you're new to the call, what is the mass calls? What's it for? Well, let me remind you what we're doing here. These mass calls are being hosted by the Working Families Party and highlighting WFP member organizations and leaders across the country. As always, we want these calls to be grounding. We want them to provide you with information and strategic orientation from movement leaders that you can trust and to give you concrete things that you can do to get off that noisy hamster wheel of information and misinformation and sometimes disinformation that's being thrown at you and back to power building actions. If you like what you see here and you want to be plugged in for more, again, you can text mass call, MASS space CALL to 30403. We do have more mass calls coming up, which you can find on our Mobilize page, and we've dropped that link in the chat for you. We'll drop it again. Make sure you've texted mass call to 30403 so that you can get the bat signal to gather again. We can't wait to see you there. Here's what we're going to do on tonight's call. First, as always, we're going to do some political education on our block and build strategy. Then we're going to have a conversation with a couple of leaders that you know who are on the front lines of our work and who are thinking about where we go from here. And as always, we're going to give you concrete ways that you can plug into this work and take action starting tonight. Because we don't learn how to be strategic to just have a better analysis than the other guys. We learn how to be strategic to put it into practice and to build our own power. All right, let's get ready for this good learning. Are y'all ready for the political education? I know I am. Let's get to it. So for today's Block and Build political education session, we're going to keep talking about power. As organizers, we have to be really clear about what we mean by this term. As we've popularized organizing, it's become everything and nothing sometimes. So we're going to spend the next couple of political education sessions digging in about what we mean when we talk about building power. But before we get into today's topic, let's take a moment, like we always do, to review some of the material that we've gone over on the past calls. So we are in a political crisis, y'all. The two major parties aren't serving us. The Republicans have been taken over by an authoritarian faction, and both major parties, yes, including the Democrats, are heavily controlled by corporate and ultra-wealthy forces. Working class people are stuck with a bad set of choices. Our task is to build a new majority and to pursue the power to govern. There's that word again, power. Our definition of governing power is deceptively simple. It simply means controlling the government. But we know this is not simple to do. There are so many things that go into it. It's about what happens in elections, but it's also what happens as part of a whole life cycle. To really govern, our movement needs to master all parts of this life cycle. At the Working Families Party, the relentless and ruthless pursuit of governing power is at the very center, the core, the heart of what we do. It's the core of our power building model. We are crystal clear that this is not an easy project. It's not going to be simple, and it won't be accomplished in 1 or 2 election cycles. It's a generational project. It's a generational commitment, and it's actually an ongoing struggle. To some, this may sound hard or depressing. To others, it may sound like an extension of the path of struggle that you're already on, that your ancestors have already been on. However this strikes you, it is important for us to be grounded in the fact that we have complicated problems and the answers are not always going to be so easy. In our past session, we introduced a framework from our friends at the Grassroots Power Project. Shout out to the Grassroots Power Project. They call it the 3 faces of power. We talked about the fact that there are aspects of power that are more and less visible to the naked eye. These forms of power are all very real and they all contribute to our ability to win for our communities. So, this is the point in our discussion of power that we need to name the elephant in the room. For many people, especially those that aren't coming up as organizers, that weren't trained as activists, the word power has a whole bunch of negative meanings. So let's not skip it. Let's dig into that. The associations we have with power can be very personal and very visceral. They may tap into our experiences in our family. They may bring up trauma from confrontations with authorities like the police. Let's look at it another way. The term broligarchy has been trending lately. Shout out to my good friend Anat for being one of the people that has popularized this term, the term broligarchy. One meaning of this is that Trump ran a campaign and is now seeking to form a government of, by, and for the bros. For many people, this is the kind of image that appears in their brain when they think about governing and government and power. Now, with Trump, everything's a bit more exaggerated and sometimes cartoonish. But even if we're not talking about Trump, many people's idea of power and government is a bunch of rich dudes, a bunch of self-defined experts who think they know better than us, telling us the way things are and ought to be. But let's take it a step further. If you've ever worked in or around an election campaign, you may also recognize that there's a broligarchy there too. If you're a nerd like me and you watch TV shows about politics, you'll recognize it right away. The stereotype of the political operative. He's a tense white dude. He talks fast and he walks fast and he's always on his phone. He's the guy who has the polling and the inside scoop and the gossip. And he tells the volunteers and the people he sees as less important than him just enough to keep them doing their jobs. This is another way that those of us who have been involved in electoral campaigns see the currency of political power accumulated and spent. I should mention, WFP ran a program called Women Run Campaigns and currently runs the Bet on Us program. It's a program that trains Black women in campaign skills to combat this very image of who gets to be the smart people in the room when it comes to building winning election campaigns. So shout out to the team. I want you to reflect on where you were taught that power is bad. Have you been taught that power is bad? Have you been taught not to want it, not to want power, or maybe just that power is something people like you, like us, would never have? Do you have an experience of power being used against you? I want you to reflect on it. Take a moment. If you want to drop something in the chat, feel free to do that. You don't have to, but if you want to share, feel free. Sometimes our worst experiences of feeling powerless have real emotion attached to them. So I want you to take a moment. And again, I'll repeat, like, where were you? Reflect for a moment on where you were taught that power is bad. Have you been socialized not to want power and why? Or are you a person that just has been taught or socialized that power is something that people like you would never have? And do you have an experience of power being used against you? Again, feel free to drop anything you feel like sharing in the chat. And as we go, we might read some of those out loud. Does anyone have an experience of power being used well or being a part of using it and building it? The point we're trying to make here is that we need to sit with all of the emotions that the idea that of power brings up for folks, for ourselves included, and certainly for regular people who do not have the privilege of being able to be on calls like this together. We have to face it as a community. We can't afford to turn away from power because we know what powerlessness looks like in our communities. Bayard Rustin, one of the leading thinkers and organizers of the civil rights movement, pointed out that the movement had a tendency within it that had argued that power would corrupt them, right? Y'all have heard it, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But he posed the problem in reverse. The absence of power can also corrupt. The sense of sitting forever in our own powerlessness can corrupt our souls and tear our communities apart. We're going to talk about Bayard Rustin more in a little bit, so let's remember that name. I like to think of power like a hammer. Can someone use it to hit you over the head? Could it harm you? Yes. But we also all need a hammer if we're going to build a village, right? We have to do that. So we have to use that. What helps me move with an affirmative stance toward power is knowing what we do has a real impact on the outcome of elections. Trump's victory may feel wide, but every day more and more information, more and more data is showing that it was not deep, y'all. Further, I hold in my mind that the outcomes of elections have real impacts on people's lives. People who I love, people who I care about, and people that I don't know, but that I want to be free. Knowing this helps me move with an empowered stance, focused on building power with others and in community. I see you all putting in the chat information about how you've been socialized around power. I see Nancy said girls cannot be powerful. It was something that they were taught in school. I see folks talking about how power was used to abuse them. I've also seen some comments about how power was used for good, like building union membership. I've seen folks talk about building the Working Families Party, helping people get elected, schools, parents, all of these folks having impact on how you were socialized to understand power. I've seen folks talk about the loss of jobs because they spoke up or because they were othered in that work. I see other folks talking about how they feel power because they know it's theirs to use. I see you. I see folks talking about teachers and principals. I see folks talking about corrupt housing. And I see folks talking about the real contradictions inside of the nonprofit structure. I see folks talking about being servers and how they feel powerless to control their income, that it's controlled by the guests that show up and the higher ups, and so many more. Y'all keep sharing your experiences. We're going to keep this moving. Thank you all for sharing. So I want us to take a look at what we're calling the first face of power on this slide. Power on the first face is about building direct pressure on decision makers and the system to achieve our goals. This might look like gathering signatures. It might look like lobbying or public meetings. It might look like direct action, like strikes or collective efforts to turn out the vote. We sometimes talk about this kind of power as social power, or sometimes as people power, right? Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop, right? If you have ever had training as an organizer or an activist, you likely recognize this simple definition of power. It is organized people combined with organized money. Quite often, the other side has way more money, so we have to compensate with more people. But these two things are the key ingredients of this social power. Power like this is sometimes referred to as power you can count. In other words, we can count how many people came to our meeting or how many votes we need to move on the city council to win our issue campaign. It's measurable. Let's be really clear about it. This kind of power we can count is the most basic and important form of our power. On election day, you can count how many votes you did or did not turn out. The same after a union drive, the same after a legislative campaign. Without this kind of power, we can't do much of anything else. So we can't skip this step. I repeat, we cannot skip the step of building social power. Lastly, this kind of power can dissipate. There's an incredible German philosopher, Hannah Arendt, who thought a lot about authoritarianism. And she warned that, quote, power springs up between men when they act together and vanishes the moment they disperse. Power springs up between men when they act together and vanishes the moment they disperse. Over time, when organizers have learned is to build power that delivers people and money in an accountable way, and to build it in enduring political vehicles or political homes that keep it from dispersing, right? It's why our organizations are so important. If we do that over time, we can aggregate and sustain our power, not just organize it for individual fights. We believe there's a key role for the Working Families Party as a political party to play here. A political party is a shared idea in the minds of most people. People understand what a party does is different than what a grassroots organization or a C3 table or coalition does. And when we organize enough people and money in one place to win, sometimes that can transfer to other places. I'll give an example. If when we won in New York City, folks hear about it which makes it easier to elect like a Kendra Brooks or a Nicholas O'Rourke to city council on a WFP ballot line in Philadelphia, and on and on and on. We are spreading our social power. Like a fire, power can be sparked, but it also needs to be harnessed in lanterns and ultimately a power station that consistently delivers for the masses. This is a very oversimplified picture of how history works. It was probably written by a card-carrying member of the Broligarchy. That theory of history is called the great man theory of history. In this version of how the world works, historic change comes from historical actors, usually men, engaged in some great struggle. This is how the story of presidential elections over the decades gets told. It's also often how the history of the civil rights movement gets told. In this version, we have two actors, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Lyndon Johnson. Now, you probably know enough of our history to have a sense that this is just wrong, and it erases all of the complexities. It also leads people coming along later and turning Martin Luther King Jr., who in his day was under FBI surveillance, into some kind of Hallmark card. This picture is still way too oversimplified, but it starts to show a bit more clearly what was actually going on. There were obviously lots and lots and lots of people involved in the civil rights movement and the fight for Black liberation in the 60s and 70s, but we're going to show three of them here in this particular slide. You see Ella Baker. Miss Baker was a leader in the NAACP and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Among many, many other things, she was a mentor to many of the leaders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. She was incredibly influential throughout the movement. Next, you'll see Stokely Carmichael, or Kwame Ture, who helped organize the Freedom Rides in Mississippi and was a leader in SNCC. He played an influential role in giving voice to the Black Power movement and was a leader in the Black Panther Party. And then you also see Bayard Rustin, who was a leader and organizer of the March on Washington. His work overlapped with Ella Baker's at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and he also had ties to the labor movement and socialist politics. You can learn more about all of these folks and so many others by checking out the SNCC Legacy Project's digital gateway. We'll drop a link to that in the chat. Again, there were many, many, many more people than just these three or these four. We could spend all day adding to this list. I'm sure you all could shout out folks in the chat that were integral to the development of the civil rights movement. The more people we would add to the list, the more diversity of opinions on strategy and tactics we would find. But the other part of this picture we have to look at is that circle over there behind Lyndon Johnson. There we see Congress. And if you want to look at power you can count, you can start by looking at the process of counting votes in Congress. Lyndon Johnson was famously good at counting votes. He's known for it. But he was not the only one who was able to count power on this terrain of struggle. Bayard Rustin, in his essay From Protest to Politics, which he wrote in 1965, is very clear-eyed about the balance of power in Congress after Lyndon Johnson's landslide victory in 1964. We're going to drop a link to that essay in the chat, From Protest to Politics. Because LBJ had won so convincingly, and because the only states that voted against him were a few Southern states, it was clear to Bayard Rustin how this tipping of the political scales had contributed to the passage of the Civil Rights Act. In the essay, Rustin talks about the need to build political power. And he also talks about the dynamics of doing so in a two-party system where broad coalitions will always have to be built in order to win and sustain those wins. We may know that just before his assassination, Martin Luther King Jr. was organizing a poor people's campaign. This is told as part of the story of how MLK broadened his political views over time to include critiques of class and also the U.S. empire. In his 1965 essay, Bayard Rustin gave us a glimpse that this was the direction the movement was moving. He talked about the need to ensure that civil rights for Black people were completely intertwined with the social and economic welfare of everyone. He was doing this because, again, he was counting up the power that the movement had. He was planning ahead. He could see the white backlash against the civil rights movement that was inevitably coming, and as a political strategist, he was attempting to protect the gains of the movement by building a cross-racial majority behind it. Now, let's switch gears a little bit from history to counting up power in the present. If we just let Trump and his loyalists tell it, with all the votes counted, he has won a historic landslide. Tell me if you've heard or seen on the news that Trump won by a landslide, or heard him say it, or one of the other MAGAites saying that they won by a landslide. What we know is that this is very, very, very far from the truth. It was a historically low margin of victory in the popular vote. And in Congress, Republicans have historically had a slim majority. In this context, we're already seeing fracture lines developing in Trump's coalition. Our job is to make those little cracks turn into big cracks. Trump's margin of victory was incredibly small. Compared to the last 4 presidents, he's at the bottom of the class. And when he or his minions talk about a landslide, we need to remember what a real landslide looks like. These are the margins of victory for Franklin Roosevelt, Johnson, Richard Nixon, and Ronald Reagan. So when Trump says his 1.6% margin of victory is a historic landslide, a watershed, let's just situate that lie within the context we're actually talking about and living out right here. I'm not saying all of this is copium. We can't afford to sit back and tell ourselves that just because it was not an actual landslide that Trump is stuck. The fact is, Trump will try to take as much power as we let him take. So we have to be both grounded and also fight against complacency or apathy. And real talk, this slide shows us why we can't be apathetic. Trump did win every swing state. It did happen. He did it by winning over working class voters that are at the very least so fed up that they were willing to vote for him to send a message. We have to take a very close count of this picture and get very clear about the power that we need to build from here. So let's end today's political education session by remembering this slide that we looked at before the election, which is still incredibly relevant right now. We can't afford to adopt strategies where all we do is react and lurch from one blocking maneuver against Trump to another. When we only do that, when we only go from blocking to blocking and fail to build our own independent political power, people power, we're handing power back over to the Democratic Party. And at the same time, like Bayard Rustin, we need to be able to count the power that we have and the power we need to build. We can't pretend that the power struggle going on with Trump and in our country is not going on. We can't pretend that that struggle isn't happening across the globe, and we can't afford to just turn inward. If we do that, we're also surrendering our power. Now, if you like the political education sessions that we've been doing on these calls, we're posting the recordings on the WFP website at www.workingfamilies.org/mass calls. Again, it's www.workingfamilies.org/mass calls. We'll drop the link to that in the chat. And we've also put downloadable versions of all of the slides and all of my speakers' notes for these political education sessions right there on the website. You can go to the website and download those and use them in your community orgs, in your social gatherings, wherever you can use them to talk about the importance of building power and blocking and building. You can find those materials one more time at www.workingfamilies.org/mass calls. Now, if you're new to the Working Families Party and you want to learn more about our theory of change and who we are, I also want to urge you to sign up right now for our next welcome gathering on Thursday night. I want to tell you that space is extremely limited. So I want you to make sure to RSVP and get a spot. It's good news that it's limited. It means y'all are showing up and showing out. So I want you to RSVP tonight to make sure that you get your spot in the welcoming gathering that's going to happen on this Thursday night. If you've been rocking with WFP for a while and you're looking to take your engagement to the next level, if you're like, I already joined, I've already been down to the welcome gatherings, you want to level up to the next level, I want you to consider joining a wolf pack or even starting one. You're going to hear more about this later in the call, but we have a wolf pack orientation this Thursday as well. So I want you to sign up for that tonight if you're ready to level up your impact, your influence in the party. And also, I want you to know that WFP members showing up for Racial Justice Surge, the largest organization in the United States that explicitly organizes white communities for justice, has launched their 10-week Gear Up training and action program. I literally just kicked it off. It's a powerful opportunity to build skills, community, and power in the lead up to 2025. So I want y'all to sign up for that. The links for all of these are in the chat. And again, will be available to you if you text mass call to 30403. Have you done it? I want to make sure you get to sign up. If you haven't signed up for Gear Up, I want you, if you're already a Surge member, I want you to shout out how amazing the first Gear Up training was. It was incredible. I want you to sign up for a wolf pack or to start one. And I want you, if you're a new person to the party, I want you to sign up for a welcome gathering. Thank you, Ellen, for being there, sending you love. I see Eric talking about joining wolf packs. Linda Burnham is just a shero. I was so honored to be there with her. Thank you all for being there and shouting it out. Get signed up, and once you've done it, I want you to put done in the chat. While y'all are getting signed up for these calls to action, I have the illustrious privilege of bringing to y'all some of the frontline leaders that I trust with my life, that we want to bring up to talk a little bit more about what it looks like to build power in this season. So I get to introduce to some and bring to others Serena Sebring and Jennifer Knox. I'm going to say a little bit more about them as I bring them up to talk and answer questions that I've got for them. Welcome, y'all. Thanks for being here. Welcome, welcome. So Serena, let's start with you. I mean, your W-2 work is literally to build the coalition of our dreams in the great state of North Carolina. And, you know, people have had North Carolina in their mouths a lot this election cycle. And certainly since the election, we've heard all sorts of stuff about what's going on with the fight to make sure that the state legislature doesn't keep y'all from getting the Supreme Court nominee in that you have chosen, the people have chosen. Shout out to our sister Allison. And even beyond that, y'all have been building people power in and outside of election cycles for quite some time, right? So just thank you, first of all, for your work. And now, you know, you've been building power longer than you've even been in your W-2 work with Blueprint North Carolina. Can you tell me about why you prioritize power building in your work and what has become possible when folks get power building right, and also the consequences if we don't get power building right for working families?
Sure. And thanks, Ash. Such an honor to join you on this call tonight. Really have already also learned a lot from the political education session that we all just shared in. I will say that building power in my work is really rooted in my need to build power as a human being, as a queer Black woman living in the South, and as a mother. And so some early lessons would just say that I know as a queer Black woman living in the South that no one is coming to save us. And that's true in this moment. That's true always, that we must gain the power to keep ourselves, our families, and our communities safe. And that the conditions of our lives are profoundly shaped by power that we can have more or less access to based on how we organize ourselves. And I also know as a mother that as many parents do, my deepest wish, my heart wish, is to bend the whole world towards my children's freedom and futures. I have 3 young people. Well, they're not as young as they once were. Now they're all taller than me. But I know that for the last 28 years, what I have thought about is the future that they will inherit. And I just want for my organizational work, for my personal work, and just so that I can reach the end of this time on this earth, knowing that I have done what I was tasked with and held what I was tasked with well, that I need to take account of power, and I am responsible for what I do with the power that I do have access to. And then lastly, as a sociologist and recovering academic, I know a few things about power in that way too. I know that power is never given. I know that power is either built and that power is taken. And that, as Frederick Douglass and the brilliant Charlene Carruthers have taught us, power concedes nothing without an organized demand. And so we better get to organizing. Those sort of insights, I think, really are what carried me into my role here at Blueprint. Just to say a little bit about who we are, and then I can talk about the power that I've had the opportunity to witness and also be part of building in our state. Blueprint is a progressive ecosystem of over 112 formal partners, organizational partners, C3s, and an expanding web of network allies, all of whom are committed to both movement building and mobilization towards a multiracial and inclusive democracy in our state. And we know we got some work to do here. We have, as you said, seen that this has been a year when all eyes of the nation have been on our state. We have been facing tremendous odds here about, what would this year look like, what was at stake, and what could be gained. And I have some good news to report from that, thankfully. As a big tent progressive organization convener, we know that it's important to build power across difference, that we need a really big team, that what we are ultimately up to is looking for more of us and looking to build not just organizational or infrastructure power, but as you said, people power, power that meets the conditions of our communities on the ground and has the potential to shape the lives of my children, my neighbors' children, and the world that they will inherit. In the South, we also have a real commitment to continuing in the legacy of Black leadership within power building, social justice organizing, and we know that we inherit a set of traditions that serve us really well in moments like the one that we are in. We were facing a situation in the last year of having a veto-proof supermajority in our state. So what we were really talking about is minority rule, is single party rule. And in that form, our people were subject to a sort of power grab that was extensive, not just at the level of state governance, but the ability to do things like use bathrooms, like have history taught in our schools, to be safe in our streets and be able to take our children to and from school without fear of deportation. These are the challenges that power creates. And in a situation where a whole state had been captured by a single party with a really clear anti-democratic aim, we knew that we were facing some tremendous odds. Folks were looking at North Carolina like, are we still a purple state? Are we a red state? Are we a blue state? And in North Carolina, what we understand historically is that oftentimes we see split ticket outcomes, meaning we'll see one outcome at the presidential level and one at on other parts of the ticket. And that's in fact what we did see in North Carolina this year. So like many folks across the country, we still have very big questions about what happens next under Trump's regime, and our coalition will be working to pivot and to adapt and to flex the muscles that we have built in this cycle towards the new reality that we have to prepare for. But what I know, as someone who's lived in this state for 20 years now, is that something really important is underway. I really believe that when history remembers North Carolina in the 2024 election, the story will be one of tenacity of our people. The story will be one of insurgent hope that the wins that we were able to experience in this cycle are 15 years in the movement making, that what we have been able to accomplish here is a pivot away from minority rule, a pivot away from surgically precise gerrymandering that cut our people out of power, a pivot away from political violence as electoral strategy and divisive culture wars. And these pivots are underway now because of what we did this year, but because of what we and our partners have been doing for the last 15 years, importantly as well. This is a long game. And what we are watching as a result of that long game is the will of the people transforming the landscape of governance in our state. We see new leadership across important state offices, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the state superintendent. Those risks that I talked about, will our children learn history in schools? Will we be able to have our access to medical care? These are the offices that will determine that in the level of North Carolinians' lived experiences. And an end to an era of single party rule via supermajority in our state legislature has come. The important veto power entrusted to a governor representing the people's choice has been restored, and that we really feel a new day is dawning here. We know that when all things are considered, not the fairy tale has landed in North Carolina, but that it has been a profoundly good year for democracy in our state. It's really no exaggeration to say that the fabric of our communities, the lives of our families and neighbors, the freedom of our people, and the future of our environment were on the ballot this year. And it took a really big team to turn a tide that we saw the biggest risks in. To give just a sense of that, of scale of that really big team, Blueprint's 112 partners collectively registered over 300,000 new voters in our state this year. They knocked over 567,000 doors, turned millions out to the polls, welcomed and celebrated first-time voters as they cast their ballots, coordinated to protect voters and the process by which we make our voices heard. And as of last week, we're still on the front lines, counting every single last vote because of a commitment, a shared commitment that every voter would vote and that every vote would count, because we believe that this is what democracy looks like, and this is our work. We know that that collective impact is really a testament to power building and to organizing and infrastructure as our strategy for doing that. And because of it, even though we faced tremendous odds, natural disaster, Hurricane Helene hit our state, potentially disenfranchising 25 counties. And instead of losing the voice in that moment, what we saw was a powerful coalition came together, not just to turn people out to vote, but also to use the strategies of our people and our history to build through mutual aid, to pull each other in this disaster recovery moment. And we know that recovery efforts, and when we keep ourselves safe, that power stays, those relationships stay, and that infrastructure stays. We know that against the odds of rampant misinformation, even about the recovery efforts against Hurricane Helene, and to scare North Carolinians away from the ballot box, we needed a mighty team of truth tellers. And so the importance of being able to tell our stories, to shape a narrative about our lives was also profoundly important in this time. And we know now that we have to be able to turn that infrastructure that was built towards election protection, towards community defense, towards the preparation for the time to come. And a key lesson there is that infrastructures built can be used for years to come. So it is worth investing the time in deep relationship building, tending to those relationships, and growing together, even across difference, even through conflict, even in moments when, like this one, the right would love to see us turn on each other and descend into petty beef with. So we have to maintain those relationships. They are truly our lifeline, and also how we build power for the long haul.
Y'all, can we show some love to Serena Sebring for all of the brilliance that she just dropped on us? I just want to lift up a little bit. She said that what she's seeing in the power building in North Carolina is tenacity, is insurgent hope, is a long game vision, is the will of the people transforming the landscape of the government in that state, and that they are not skimping around the importance of the capital of relationship. So shout out to the 112 members of Blueprint North Carolina. Shout out to our other siblings that are doing the good work on the ground. Shout out to the Carolina Federation and everybody that's on the ground there doing work from Black Mountain all the way over to Goldsboro and all the good folks in Eastern North Carolina. We're sending y'all a bunch of love. We see you and we respect you, and we will follow your leadership anywhere. Thank you, Serena, for not regarding it robbery to be here with us tonight. Y'all give it up one more time for Serena Sebring. You're getting mad love in the chat. There's some, some North Kakalaki folks in the chat. I see some Bull City folks in the chat. I see y'all. I see y'all in the chat. I see you. And shout out to North Carolina. We love y'all. Jay Knox, Jennifer Knox. Y'all know Jay Knox. She's the Working Families Party's National Director of Organizing. Can we show some love for Jay Knox and the whole crew of staff members across the ecosystem of WFP? Jay Knox has been making these mass calls happen, y'all. Like they would not be happening without Jay Knox. So thank you so much for your incredible work, Jay Knox. I want to bring you into the conversation now. So you've been organizing literally all over the country. I never know where you are in any of our planning calls because you've been hopping all over the place, building power, organizing with WFP members and our sister organizations all over the country. So I want you to just take a minute to tell us what's on your mind as you help shape the party's next steps in regards to building power.
Yeah. Um, Thank you. I love being behind the scenes on these, but also, it's fun to get up front now and then. So thank you, Ashley, for having me. And also just shout out to Serena. North Carolina is so much my organizing inspiration right now. So we appreciate everything you're doing. And yeah, WFP is really experiencing a wave of new members, dues paying members, activists into our wolf packs and our local organizing. And so we're grateful for all the ways that folks are showing up for us in this moment. And I think looking to us to help strategize the path forward. And so yeah, we have a bunch of thoughts as we are retooling this strategy to meet, what will be a very different administration come into January. I'm inspired by right now the quote from Martin Luther King that says, power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. And I think it is absolutely the obligation and the duty of all the good-hearted people on this call and Serge's call and all the mass calls to get very serious about backing our love, our care with a real power building strategy. And so in this moment, I'm thinking about how do we make power concrete for people and not abstract? That's of critical importance. I think telling stories like the one Serena told is incredible, is important. People have to know that we have seen and confronted regimes like this before, and we have fought back. And that is how we're going to dispel powerlessness, which we know is the enemy of our ability to build power. And so I'm inspired by North Carolina. I'm inspired by my home state of Wisconsin that was under a GOP trifecta for a decade. Many people will remember seeing our Capitol rotunda filled with people. And, initially they lost. They were not able to block harmful legislation like Act 10 that took away the ability for many teachers and employees to be able to bargain on things like their wages. But they didn't give in. They fought back, and cycle over cycle, they took back the governorship. They took back the Supreme Court. That Supreme Court passed their maps. Now they've gone from being one seat away from a Republican veto-proof majority to being almost at the point where the state house and Senate can be won back, which, I'm gonna go ahead and just affirm and put out in the universe that will happen in 2026. And so we have to be concrete about power, make sure that we're accountable, and folks have done that before. And so we need to take that as inspiration now all across the country to make sure that we do that. Second is making sure that we're talking about staying focused. I'm going to reiterate Serena on the long game. There are places where we have successfully begun to crack the foundation of the two-party system, and I'm interested in spreading the gospel around that. So how many of you drop in the chat if you deployed with Seed the Vote and went to throw down in a swing state with Working Families Party or an allied organization? I'm inspired by that, and we need to do more of that because I think fundamentally when we can see what it looks like, then we can better build and spread. And then lastly, I think the thing that I'm really focused on is relationship. How do we fundamentally get into much deeper relationships with the Black and Brown and multiracial working class communities that we aim to organize and represent? I'm curious about how we go from, in many places where we're door knocking with strangers and having incredibly meaningful experiences, but to the point where we have actually blocks and we have neighborhoods that rep WFP. We're starting to see that in a North Philly, for example, where everybody knows Kendra Brooks, their city council person, is not a Democrat. They're a Working Families Party member, but they remember also Nikki from the North Side, Nikki from Nicetown, right? And therefore, right, that neighborhood, we're in relationship differently. And so how do we build that in many other places across the country? So I'm inspired by the bold offensive fights that will cause folks to see us as the heroes because we are the ones that we're waiting for.
Yeah, you're getting mad love in the chat, J Knox. I see a whole bunch of folks that canvass with WFP. You see the vote
Yeah.
for Black Lives, showing up for racial justice. I see you, Mamie. I see you, Sarah. I see you, Edmund. I see David. That was down in Phoenix. I see Daniel. I see Judy being like, yo, y'all need to come out to Texas. It's time to flip that state. I see you and I agree. I see a whole bunch of folks. It's too many of y'all to name because we're getting at the top of the hour. We still have another speaker, but folks mobilized to the hundreds. Y'all, that 100,000 some odd people on the November 7th call, y'all mobilized again. Y'all helped seed the vote, cure ballots in California. Y'all held community gatherings. We are worth fighting for community gatherings. We have a little note about that at the end too. So y'all are doing the work. And we just heard some gems from J Knox that I feel like are really important. So I'm just going to reiterate them really quickly. We've got to move people to thinking about power as something concrete, not just abstract, right? Our values and our feelings are not a strategy, y'all. We've got to get more concrete. I hear J Knox saying that we have to be intentional about staying focused in a season of a lot of noise and a lot of distraction. And that focus in some parts has to be on our long game, right? That the impact of a second Trump administration, similarly to the first, is going to have generational impact. So we have to be coming up with concrete power building strategies that stay focused, and that are also thinking about the long arc of struggle. And then again, she reiterated in a similar fashion as Serena that relationships really matter, y'all. Relationships with our neighbors, with our folks in our community, but also with our sister organizations as we continue to build this kind of movement infrastructure. So I want y'all to like just let that brilliance seep into your pores, into your spirits. I want you to hear about the life-changing, life-saving work that these sisters have done in North Carolina and Wisconsin, all across the country, because what's real is they both have worked in national movement spaces and regional movement spaces and state-based organizing and local organizing for decades. And I want you to show some love in the chat for Serena Sebring and for Jay Knox, also known as Jennifer Knox, when we say her whole government name. Y'all show some love to the homies. Thank y'all for being here. We love you and we appreciate you. Y'all know it wouldn't be a mass call if my brother, my homie, my friend, one of the best organizers and power builders in the game. Y'all, like, the way I got to know him was watching him organize, building lists, building relationships in Ferguson, and then coming to Charleston, South Carolina, when Walter Scott was murdered, and helping organizations, helping individuals in that community also build up their organizing chops. And now he's done it in the movement for Black Lives. He did it with the Rising Majority. He's done it all over the place. New York Civic Engagement Roundtable. He's done it all over the place. And now we are blessed to, in the seat of the national director of the Working Families Party, have a organizer who believes in building power. I want y'all to go bananas in the chat and show some love to the brilliant, the amazing, the loving and kind and generous organizer, our national director of the Working Families Party, Maurice Mitchell. Mo, come on and give us a good word.
Man, wow, I am fired up. I am so fired up, and I'm so blessed to be with you. How are you doing? Ash, thank you so much for your leadership. Please give Ashley Henderson some flowers in the chat. Give it up for J Knox. Give it up for Sabrina. Oh, man, what a night. And I just want to thank you, every single one of you, for rocking with us on this call. And for those who've returned and been with us on the journey this entire year, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, I hope you're leaving stirred up about the mandate to build power at a different scale and about building it with the Working Families Party. We know our mandate is to block Trump and to build a cross-racial and working class majority voting bloc that can deliver the change our communities desperately need. We have to dispel ourselves and our communities from the feelings of powerlessness that sometimes creep in. And that starts ultimately with you. We need you today, to make that vision, that hope, that power a reality. Now, what do we know? We know Trump's administration will push an agenda that leaves fair wages, healthcare, education, housing, climate justice off the table. We know this. But we will not let them silence our voices or steal our power, because the strength we need lies within us. It lies within our communities. It lies within the bonds that we build. It lies in the connections that we build every single day together. Now, we're not just going to go on defense, because they'd love to see a movement on its heels, a movement in perennial defense, a movement that is constantly rushing to put out the fires that they set. Listen, y'all, we're going on offense. In fact, I want you to write in the chat, we're going on offense. Let me see that in the chat. We are going on offense, right? Authoritarians, what do they want? They want you to obey in advance. They want you to assume that they are in power. But this experience has taught us that our defiance, our organizing, our people power is the true power. And that slim margin that they have, they want to convince you that that is a mandate. That is no mandate. We, everybody here, everybody in our communities, we are our own heroes. We are the main characters in the story that we will write as working people for our justice. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We have the power to build our ranks in targeted communities to ensure local officials feel our collective power and answer to our collective power. Guess what? That's called a democracy. That's all that's called. Now, we have the power to break the coalition Trump is trying to weave together. And that begins by making WFP a household name. I will not rest until WFP and the purple and orange are understood and are synonymous with working people's power. Something we talk about at the dinner table, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods, the new common sense, the common sense that we as working people weave together, instead of the common sense top down that corporations and the haters attempt to drown out our voices with. So together, we can show working families that the two-party system is not their only option. Now, wolf packs are the heart of this mission. These small, flexible teams of 8 to 12 people are not just about taking action. Their central mission is to grow the Working Families Party and welcome more people into this movement. Wolf packs are part of how we change the game for 2025, a critical year for state and local elections. They help us build grassroots power for local races and deepen our capacity to hold officials accountable and to be in right relationship with Working Families Party endorsed elected officials. Now, by teaming up with national partners like those you've seen on these mass calls, wolf packs can amplify grassroots pressure on legislative issues, support community organization, and protect our neighbors, institutions, and resources targeted by Trump's agenda. This isn't individual work. They want us to assume that we're simply just individuals, just floating around. That's what they want. They know that we divided are easily to take out. Now, this is not individual work. This is collective work. We run with our pack, and together we become an unstoppable force. So here's how you could step into this power. Are you ready? Now, the first thing that you could do is, and get your phone out, take your phones out, and text the word connect to 30403. Connect to 30403, because like I said before, divided as individuals, we're easy to isolate, but connected, the people have always been victorious. So text the word connect to 30403. Connect with local organizers who will help you find your role in this movement. Join a wolf pack. Build a team of friends, family, and coworkers committed to growing the party and taking action together. Wolf packs will be trained and supported to host local welcome gatherings, to deepen community organizing, and to drive real change in your neighborhoods. So RSVP for our wolf pack orientation and go to the link. It is wfpus.org/wolfpack. Also, invite others. So you could use ourwfp.org. That is the URL, ourwfp.org, to access your WFP member and activist portal. And that portal will have shareable links and tools, and you could use that to track your progress as you invite friends and neighbors and coworkers to join WFP and take action alongside you. And then dig in deeper. If you want to learn more about WFP and how you can build power with us, please join Welcome Gatherings. There's a Welcome Gathering this Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So you could sign up. The link should be in the chat. It's wfpus.org/welcome. It's the perfect place to understand how we organize, how we grow, and how we fight back together. This is how we build resilience. Resilience in the face of Trump and MAGA and their lies. By expanding our relationships and growing the multiracial working class voting bloc that can combat divisive forces that are all around us and attempting to convince us of the lie that we don't have the power to push back. My friends, the fight for fair wages, for healthcare, for education, for justice, it starts ultimately with us, and it starts right now. Text CONNECT to 30403. Join or lead a wolf pack. Host a welcome gathering. Visit ourwfp.org. Spread the word. Together, we will build the power we need to face whatever comes our way. Because the people united will never be defeated. Thank you, family. Onward.
Listen, we can do better than that. I need you to show some love for the one, the only, our national director of the Working Families Party, Maurice Mitchell. I see folks saying like, yo, I remember him from them TikTok videos. They said it in the chat. Dylan also said, thank you for your appearance on Breaking Points. We've seen you. You've been putting in all the skin in the game to make sure that we get a democracy that is for and by working families. Y'all show some love to Maurice Mitchell in the chat. I also see a bunch of people saying they're ready to be on the offense. That's good to hear. Y'all make sure y'all get signed up. Pay attention to these calls to action. We need you to text mass call to 30403. We want you to join the party. We want you to become a dues paying member. The link is in the chat. And if you want and you're new to these calls, please, please, please sign up to join a Working Families Party welcome gathering. Remember, we have one this Thursday. You can become a Wolfpack leader or join a Wolfpack near you. You can join us for the orientation. That's also going to happen on the 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can access all of the recordings and materials from past mass calls at workingfamilies.org/mass calls. And you can bring your friends into this movement. We need you to. Ask them to text mass call to 30403. And last but certainly not least, you can gear up with our sister organization Showing Up for Racial Justice and be a part of the largest organization in the United States that is specifically organizing white communities to fight for justice. You can go and get trained with those good folks by going to surge.org/gear up. We need you to go and do that tonight. I also just want to say for the record that if you are not yet following Maurice Mitchell on Instagram, you should be. We're going to drop a link to his Instagram in the chat. You just go to Instagram.com/Maurice WFP. That's how you can follow and hear the good word from him, even when we're not on our mass calls. So if you need a good word, you need to hear our directives, you want to know how you can be doing meaningful work to build democracy, to build our power, this is how you find him. I don't know about you, but I am feeling powerful in this moment. It doesn't mean I'm not feeling scared or anxious or sad, grieving. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling all of it, but I'm certainly feeling more powerful on this call tonight because of every single one of you beautiful people that did not go do something else, go be somewhere else, go prioritize something else, that you continue to come together across our differences to figure out how we can build independent political power for working families. Makes me feel powerful, makes me and my community feel loved and supported. We come tonight to keep our discussion going about power, and we're not done yet. We have more calls coming up, and we're going to keep exploring this topic from different angles. I hope you will keep tuning in. Our next call is on December 19th. and it's going to be a special one. Y'all might remember that right after the election on November 7th, we invited a bunch of additional coalition partners. I'm going to not name them all because I will leave folks out, but you remember Move On was there, Indivisible was there. We had folks that were like researchers and thinking about the far right. We had grassroots organizers that were doing frontline work from immigration to reproductive justice. Y'all saw it. It was incredible. Us and 100,000 of our buddies got on and spent 4 hours learning with one another, building with each other, inspiring one another, and holding space to grieve and feel our feelings. Y'all, we almost broke the internet with that call, and we were streamed on Free Speech TV. On the 19th, we're going to join with those coalition partners again to hear a report back on the work that's been going on since that call. Y'all remember We Are Worth Fighting For community gatherings, and you probably went to the We Are Worth Fighting For website and signed up to see if there was something going on near you. As usual, that call will have political education and we'll have some incredible speakers, and yours truly will be there that night. So I want you to mark your calendars. That mass call to give that report back is going to be on December 19th. Again, it's going to be on December 19th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. December 19th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and I need you to RSVP so that we know you're coming. Again, if you've texted mass call to 30403, you're going to get the link. But if you go to the Mobilize link that is already in the chat and sign up for the next mass call and the mass calls that we've got scheduled for January, you will get an update, an email, a text message telling you to come on in the room when we start the call on December 19th. I hope to see you there. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other. We love you, we respect you, and we want you to be free.